Welcome back to more Warhammer lore. In today's episode we will be covering the mighty Hashut, the Father of Darkness, as well as his effect on Chaos Dwarf society, and some of the associated units and even the unique lore of magic he has gifted the Dwarf with. Now, before we get too deep into Hashut, if you haven't already seen my Chaos Dwarf Society video, I would highly recommend you watch it before watching this video, as I'm going to assume you have a general knowledge of Chaos Dwarf Society and how it is structured, as well as how the Dwarf came to be. Hashut, the Father of Darkness, is the minor chaos god of fire, greed, and tyranny, and the Chaos Dwarf's patron god. A grim and malignant being, often represented as a great blazing bull wreathed in smoke and shadow. Hashut is a chaos god, although some scholars of the arcane world would label him as an archdemon rather than a dark god, while others insist it in some other foul entity let loose upon the world during the Great Catastrophe. Hashut is closely associated with tyranny, greed, and fire, and hatred, and is a being whose gift of power comes at a rather terrible price. As with much of their origins, just how the Dwarfs of the East came to seal their pact with Hashut remains shrouded in dark times of the great sundering of the world by chaos, and in truth the Chaos Dwarfs themselves may have only a dim and warped understanding of how they became bounded up with their nightmarish deity. The twisted runic cartouches that adorn their fire temples do however speak of the abandonment of the Dwarfs of Zorn Uskul by their ancestor gods during the Great Cataclysm, their finding of salvation and succor with their new god, and the thirst of Hashut for sacrifice and subjugation in return for his patronage. Over the centuries, in return for flesh and blood, homage and devotion, Hashut has gifted the Chaos Dwarfs with malign secrets and powerful sorcery that fused with their mastery of industry and forgecraft to create many demon-fused machineries and monstrous engines of war. Dominion over the fires of the earth and arcane and malevolent lore had brutalized their sanity and souls. The pact between Chaos Dwarfs and their dark god has only deepened over time and grown to the point where the tendrils of Hashut's malevolence and the Chaos Dwarfs' own bitter souls have become one. So the first question we must ask ourselves about Hashut is, what exactly is he? I feel that it is fairly obvious that he is in fact a chaos god, but why is there even a question? And I believe the reason for the confusion lies with how Games Workshop originally implemented the Chaos Dwarfs. You see, originally the Dwarf were said to be worshippers of Khorne, yes, the blood god, and this does kind of make sense. Khorne is very focused on meeting opponents honorably in battle and murdering them with brutal efficiency. Khorne also is known to use demon engines as well in battle, where one binds a demon into a machine, giving it life and making it all the more potent in the process. And the Chaos Dwarfs also have learned to do the same from Hashut. This is where the similarities end, as the other gifts from Hashut was magic, and Khorne completely despises magic. So in my opinion, Hashut cannot be an embodiment of Khorne. And what I mean by that is that sometimes in the Warhammer world, the ruinous powers are worshipped simply by other names. For instance, the Norse worship Khorne as the Hound, and Tzeentch as the Raven, and so on and so forth. With the blessings of magic to the Dwarf, that rules out Khorne completely, but some say that perhaps Hashut is an excommunicated bloodthirster, the greater demons of Khorne, possibly fallen from grace because of his use of magic. Now, I don't think that is possible, as bloodthirsters are essentially slivers of Khorne himself, and therefore they act like their master. So one practicing magic would be almost unthinkable, and also if a bloodthirster ever betrayed Khorne, which has happened in the past, if he was not stripped of all free will, thinking, as Skarbrand has been, I would assume it would be highly likely that the blood god, not being a very lenient deity, would simply have this transgressor killed and his skull placed upon his throne. Now, that leaves us with very few options as to what Hashut is. And it is my opinion that often the most simple explanation is in fact the best. I believe that Hashut is a chaos god in the same sense that the horned rat of the Skaven is a chaos god. He's separate from the ruinous powers, but not their equal. Essentially a lesser deity, but a powerful deity in his own right. Probably as strong or stronger than most of the deities of the Dwarven ancestor gods. And now that we've established what he is, it is important to note that he was manifested in the realms of chaos by the Dawizar, as they were pleading for their lives in a time when chaos energy was running rampant across the Warhammer world. And therefore, chaos entities could easily make themselves corporeal and perform amazing feats in the physical world. And utilizing this train of thought, one could assume that what would normally take a vast number of people, years or decades to manifest a deity, happened very quickly after the scorned Dawi abandoned their old gods and received their new twisted, but rather reliable patron deity. Of course, in the bargain of their new deity, they were cleansed, or not necessarily cleansed, they were stabilized of all the mutations running rampant through their dwarven throng, and for the most part it saved them from complete damnation. In one sense, there's always a double-edged sword when you make a deal with the devil. Now, I have been rambling for a few minutes at this point, and I think it is important to answer the question, as it is often a misunderstood and highly debated topic in the lore community as to what Hashut actually is. So that is my personal opinion of the Father of Darkness. Now let's move into the worship and blessings of Hashut. Now, first and foremost, he is worshipped similarly to other deities in the Warhammer world. There are temples and an organized religion, which also doubles as the way the Chaos Dwarf's government mostly functions. The largest and only recorded temple we are told of is in Zarnagarund, the capital of the Dawizar. Now, if you have not seen my society video, I hope that you would go take a look at it now, because then you'll kind of have an idea of Zarnagarund and what it's all about, and the Chaos Dwarf Society in general at this point, because I'm just assuming you already know what I'm talking about. So at the pinnacle of the city is the Temple of Hashut, the bull-shaped god of the Chaos Dwarfs, who they call the Father of Darkness. His temple is guarded by bull centaurs, creatures mutated from Chaos Dwarfs long ago. They have the body of a bull, but the torso of a Chaos Dwarf, with long snaggly tucks and exotically curled beards. Inside the temple, its guardians perform bloodthirsty rites, throwing captives into cauldrons of molten metal to the echoing laughter of the assembled Chaos Dwarf sorcerers. On top of the temple stands the iron statue of Hashut. Its hollow iron belly contains a furnace heated by coal so that the statue glows red hot, and anyone who touches its surface suffers searing wounds. The god is the embodiment of the city, its deity, and its master, whose power flows through the Chaos Dwarf sorcerers, and for whom thousands of slaves are sacrificed by fire and furnace. Now, I can't speak for all of the different and twisted ways the rites are carried out, but the furnace they speak of is actually more of a kiln, or a hollowed out bronze statue in the shape of Hashut. Well, it could be some other metal, but I'm assuming bronze. And the unfortunate sacrifice is chained inside said statue, and then set over a fire, or perhaps a forge, one would assume, to be burned alive, or more precisely, to be baked alive in what is essentially a giant oven. It is a rather gruesome end, as most chaos rites tend to be, but the Chaos Dwarfs are rather unique in that they don't just perform these rites to appease their god and receive blessings, which they do, but they also use these rites and many others to harvest materials for their demon forges that they use to create demon engines, something I will be covering in more depth in my military video, so be on the lookout for that soon. And I want to say that this method of torture and or sacrifice, if you want to go there, has been done by the Romans and or the Etruscans, one of the two, and possibly, if I remember correctly, in medieval times at some point. They also had this method of essentially baking people to death. And now that we know how and where Hashut is worshipped, let's get into the blessings he has chosen to give to his followers. To survive the realms of chaos, the Chaos Dwarfs turned to the evil bull god Hashut, whom they call the Father of Darkness. Hashut laid out his blessings upon them, and for the first time, magic users rose among the dwarven race. The Chaos Dwarf sorcerers now rule the rest of their people with absolute authority, for they are not only powerful mages, they are also the priesthood of Hashut. They are strange and tortured beings, greatly skilled at the bending of magic into their ingenious engineering, but cursed. Dwarfs were never meant to wield the magic of chaos, and the price they pay is the curse of stone. Each Chaos Dwarf sorcerer will inevitably one day slowly transform into an immovable stone statue. The charge starts with their feet, which they turn gray and useless, before progressing through the rest of their body. Many of them use their sorcerous engineering to construct new steam-driven bodies for a time, but they too eventually succumb to the curse. Their immobile forms now line the road leading to the center of their mighty empire, the Tower of Zar-Nagarund, City of Fire and Desolation. We actually get to see this procession of stone sorcerers in the Wulfric the Wanderer novel, and it seems to have the effect of driving people mad with bloodlust and cowing slaves in its presence. Perhaps some kind of leftover chaotic magic from the sorcerers themselves. But the cursed I find much more interesting. As you should know that dwarfs are, by their nature, perhaps even their physiology, resistant to magic. This is probably one of the reasons why they are such a hardy people and are supposed to be incapable of wielding the winds of magic unless they channel it into something else. But rune magic is a topic for another time. So when Hashut blessed his followers with magic, they became exceedingly powerful. But it seems that the dwarf's natural physiology rebelled at this blasphemous and unnatural phenomenon. Therefore, unlike the other Dawizar, whom are long-lived even by dwarven standards, are guaranteed the sorcerers to meet their end by their body rejecting the magic they infuse themselves with to cast their unholy magic and slowly turn them into stone. The process is rather slow and starts at the feet, as we discussed. Once they solidify, often some kind of machine is made to allow them to get around on their own. But then, slowly, their chest and then their arms are next. Then they are unable to cast their magic, being completely reliant on their followers to perform their rites to Hashut for them. And finally, their head is turned, and then they are brought to Zar-Nagarund for the procession we talked about earlier. It appears to be a rather painful way to go, and many of the current Chaos Sorcerers of the Dawizar are actively looking for a way to rid themselves of this curse completely. The Dawizar Sorcerers practice the lore of Hashut, which is in its own unique lore, separate from the normal ones of magic, much in the same of the lore of Ruin for the Skaven. Now, it does seem to contain aspects of other lores, such as it is very akin to bright magic or fire magic to the layperson, and it has lots of other aspects of the lore of metal and the lore of death. So, a lot of damage being dealt and a lot of just shows of magical destruction, essentially, as well as sowing fear amongst the enemy and bolstering your troops at the same time. Now, I won't go into the individual spells because that could take a while, but I would like to move on to the actual followers of the Father of Darkness, separate from the sorcerers, and that would be the Bull Centaurs. Warped and dangerous creatures, Chaos Dwarf Bull Centaurs are, as their name suggests, twisted amalgamisms of Chaos Dwarf and ferocious bull in aspect. The unnatural fusion of creating hulking, monstrous beasts far larger than either and driven with cannibalistic appetites. Many centuries ago, during the time of Chaos, a fraction of those that survived the onslaught became horrifically mutated. Their stubborn dwarf resistances to the warping taint overwhelmed utterly by the awful energies of which they were subjected, and so the first Bull Centaurs were born. They came to serve their wider kin as shock troops and temple guardians, and to them was entrusted the protection of the sacred fanes of Hashut, as they more than any other had been twisted in the closest semblance of the Father of Darkness's image. Into each successive generation of Chaos Dwarfs, a handful of new blessed kin has been born, usually to the death of their unfortunate dams, and such children are given over immediately to the sorcerers to serve in turn. This number, however, has not proven enough, and Hashut's inventive priesthood have wielded their dark arts to make more, tampering with the offspring using horrific magic, and even fusing them within the frameworks of metal and demon-tainted flesh to swell the ranks of their temple guardians. As well as serving as temple guardians, the Bull Centaurs are also entrusted with dangerous tasks by their master, who trusts them implicitly. They are hulking, savage creatures whose strength and endurance far exceeds that of normal Chaos Dwarfs, and thanks to their strange forms, they are far swifter in battle. As they age, their flesh hardens and distorts almost to be consistent of living metal, and rather than heal naturally from injuries, they must instead rely upon their sorcerer masters to repair their wounds with poultices of molten mercury, steel structures, and brazen splints. Although as keen-witted and as intelligent as their Chaos Dwarf brethren, and utterly devoted to the worship of Hashut, their Father of Darkness, they are even swifter to anger, and are often otherwise preoccupied with a great hunger for flesh. A good number of the slave sacrifices bound for Hashut's temples will actually be ripped apart, limb from limb, at the bull centaurs' holy feasts, as while slave meat is a common fare for the chaos dwarfs, the bull centaurs prefer their meals both alive and screaming, a very awful sight to picture. And as you can see, the bull centaurs are terrifying and devout followers of Hashut. They are seen as the blessed of Hashut and serve almost as a Templar order that are completely dedicated to the Father of Darkness. So much so that in Chaos Dwarf history, the Sorcerer Overseers have been known to use the bull centaurs as enforcers to quell rebellions of not only slaves, but also other Chaos Dwarfs. And though they are loyal to their sorcerer overlords, as they are seen as mouthpieces that speak for Hashut, if the sorcerer is even ever proven to be disloyal or is seen as weak and unworthy of Hashut, the bull centaurs would have no problem killing their former master and probably eating him. Now, as a little caveat, there is one more servant or possible elite guard for the sorcerer overlords of the Dawizar. Now, they are not in the Chaos Dwarf roster, but they make an appearance in the aforementioned Wulfric novel. As I stated earlier, the Dawizar, much like their kin to the west, do not waste anything, from materials to slaves and even the corpses and their very souls of their sacrifices are put to use. Same can be said for the Chaos Dwarfs themselves. Everyone in their society serves a purpose, and those that do not or cannot are seen as weak and either ostracized and put to use or outright killed for their weakness. For instance, as we stated earlier, the stone sorcerers are used as a grand procession into the temple of Hashut, and in death still serve their god. The same is true for the Rins, or female Chaos Dwarfs. Much like the dwarfs of the west, the Chaos Dwarfs have a small population of women, or Rins as they are called, when in comparison to their men, making them highly valuable and not to be risked in open warfare, normally. But what happens to a Rin whom is past her prime, or is found to no longer be capable of having children? In the West, these women are seen as respected elders similar to the Longbeards, but there's also the option of joining the priestesses of Valea and serving their hold in that way as a healer. The Dawizar do not have any of these things. So what happens to these females who find themselves in the same situation? Well, they are not serving any purpose if they cannot provide children, and so they are made into an elite guard for the Sorcerer Lord that serve at his personal discretion. Now, I'm not sure if this is voluntary or not, but I would assume that they would go willingly, as the alternative would be more likely violent and possibly end in one of the bronze kilns of Hashut. Now, you can speculate all you want on what the sorcerers do with these elite warriors, all you want, but it is shown that they can be extremely fanatical in their loyalty to their sorcerers, willing to sacrifice themselves to keep him safe in the name of the Father of Darkness. Now, I could not find a name for this group, but we do get to see them in the Wulfric novel, so I at least have a vague idea that they do in fact exist in the lore. At least in my mind they do, and it just makes sense the way everything's laid out. So there is that. Now, that is pretty much all I could drum up for you on Hashut. Now, before I end the video, I would like to say thank you to all of my loyal subscribers and all of my new followers. It really does mean a lot to me how much support I have been getting, and I will continue to make more videos for you guys as long as you are watching. Now, if you are new to the channel, I do ask that you like and subscribe to the channel to help you keep up with any new content I have and anything you might be interested in. It also makes this content easier for others to find and share. Now, with that out of the way, I hope that you learned something new today. And as always, if I messed something up or missed something, feel free to leave it in the comment section. I'm more than happy to take criticism, and or if I made a mistake, I will do my best to rectify that and put it in my next video. As always, I have been Jumbo Thick. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Have a good day.